Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Recover You. We have a solo episode today. Patrick and I are trading sicknesses back and forth. So he wasn't feeling very good this weekend. And so I'm going to record the episode myself today. And we're going to discuss questions to think about when considering marriage. So this might seem a little bit odd because most of you listening probably are already married, but let me explain why I think this is an important episode. Some of you might be divorced or heading towards a divorce or have been divorced for a really long time and are thinking, how in the world can I get into another relationship and think about things differently? Many of you probably have children, whether they're young or maybe they're in high school or maybe they're in college and they're thinking about getting married. And one of the things that I think the recovery process has given to me and Patrick is a completely different perspective on life and a deeper emphasis on how important it is to have vulnerable, open conversations, honest conversations with people, especially within our family and people we have influence with, which would primarily be our children. And so one of the things that, recovery changes the way we view the world. It changes how we interact with the world. It changes how we raise our kids, and it hopefully gives us more insight into, here are the mistakes that we made, here are the mistakes that I've made, and here are the conversations that might be helpful to have with you so that you can, still make your own decisions and still make your own mistakes, but go into life and adulthood and marriage, perhaps with more wisdom and more awareness and more tools and resources than I did. And so that's a little bit of how Patrick and I have viewed parenting an adult, moving through high school and into college and now about to graduate and moving into adulthood. We're trying to consistently have deeper conversations about anything and everything that he's willing to have conversations with us. And so we wanted to sort of do this episode. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you are someone that is considering getting married or remarried, or maybe this is the first episode of the podcast that you've ever listened to, and you're not a betrayed partner, and you do not struggle with porn addiction, but you just saw the title of this and thought, hey, what are the questions I should consider when thinking about marriage? Welcome. We're happy to have you. So wherever you are in your journey, we hope that these questions spur some healthy conversations and some thinking and some thoughts in your life about the next steps, whatever that might look like. So let's just dive right in. I'm going to walk through a bunch of questions, and some of them I might have a little bit of application or story to go with it, and some of them I might just share the question. But here are some things that I would encourage you to think about or consider. And by the way, this isn't a comprehensive list. There's probably so many more out there, and I would love to maybe do a part two if you see that I've missed like a big section of something that you think is really important to talk about before you get married, send it my way and we can always do a part two. But one of the things that a lot of people are familiar with, especially in the faith community, is premarital counseling. And this is sort of a list that's like, hey, these are questions that maybe you'll get asked in premarital counseling, but maybe you won't. Sometimes when you go, it's sort of like just checking off a box, and it's like, hey, we're going to do a personality quiz and start some conversations, but it's not always super in depth. So this could build on that, or it could replace that, depending on the situation. Or again, it could just be something to think about. So the first question is, have you had a significant conflict? And if so, how was the conflict itself handled and what did repair look like? So I want you to think about if you're in a significant relationship. And by the way, if you're married, you can also think about a lot of these questions. They may be great to have, even if you're 10 years into your marriage and you haven't really, opened up the door to some of these topics. It might be a great time to do that. Okay. So have you had a significant conflict? And if so, how was the conflict itself handled and what did repair look like? So I want to make a clarification with this question. I'm not talking about arguing. Okay. I'm not talking about fighting. I'm not talking about knockdown, drag out, yelling fights. Okay. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, I don't think a couple that doesn't argue, that can't be healthy. And they really have this perception around arguing and conflict equals a healthy relationship. And I think where that comes from is this idea of, well, if you don't disagree on anything, that's not healthy. And that is the piece that I would agree with them on, is saying, if you don't feel safe enough in your relationship to have conversations where you disagree, that's problematic. However, where I might disagree is the idea of arguing or fighting. Like when I say conflict, it means a disagreement. It does not mean any sort of yelling or fighting or diminishing or dismissing of or disrespecting your other partner inside of the conflict. Those are two totally different things. Because Patrick and I have shared, we have a lot of deep conversations. I can count on probably one hand, and I'm trying to think how long we've been together now. Since 2011, so however long that is, I can count on one hand in all of that time how many quote unquote fights or arguments where it's escalated and, arguing and yelling or, whatever that we have had. It's so incredibly minimal. Even through betrayal, we just don't fight. So that is not what I mean when I say I want you to think about a conflict. Now, that's another consideration to think about is, hey, do we fight a lot? And is that healthy? And before you decide to get into a big long-term, legal, lifelong, hopefully, commitment to somebody, like how do you talk about things you disagree with? So the idea with this question is thinking about something that has come up that you disagree on. How was that handled and how did you repair? So if there was something that's like really, you see things very differently, I want you to look back and I want you to think about how were we able to navigate that, or were we able to navigate that? And if it was a big disagreement and we had that conversation, how did we repair after? So were feelings hurt in that? Did someone feel misunderstood? Did you feel angry or upset by that? And if so, how were you guys able to come back together? And just sort of looking back and going, do I think that the way we handled a disagreement was healthy? And if not, think about what would be healthy and how would we like to address that in the future? Okay, so I want you to kind of think about how have you navigated significant conflicts and what did repair look like? That's something to consider. And if you're not really sure that it was handled in a healthy way, it might be an opportunity to talk to somebody that can help you navigate that before you jump into a lifelong commitment and don't have the tools and resources for navigating conflict. That might be something to work on ahead of time. Okay, the second question to consider is, have you spent excessive amounts of time in close quarters to see what it's like to be around this person almost 24/7? So I know everyone has different opinions, whether personal or religious or faith-based opinions about whether someone should live together before getting married or not. So some people don't care at all. They think that's a smart thing to do. And other people say, no way, Jose, you shouldn't do that. So I'm not going to say anything about that per se right now, other than even if you're not, quote unquote, living together prior to marriage, I do think it's very important to spend a lot of in-person close quarters time with that person. So just as an example, like Patrick and I were together almost as much, basically all of my free time outside of work. So I would get off of work, I would come over to the house, I would stay until 10, and then I would go home and spend the night, and then go to work in the morning. And so we were eating meals together, we were hanging out together, we were spending a lot of time together, we were navigating life together, and then we'd talk and text and all these things in between. So I say this is, I think, very important. There are so many things that you learn being in close quarters. It's very, very different than a long distance relationship where you have a lot of verbal conversations over the phone, but you aren't actually navigating life in the same room together. And so the conversational part of a relationship is very important, right? You want to kind of dig into how does someone think? How do you guys communicate? Do you share the same beliefs? And so I'm not diminishing that part at all. It's really, really important. And sometimes starting long distance or having periods in your relationship that are long distance can really nurture that part of the relationship. But it is really important, I think, when you're making a decision that is hopefully lifelong, that you sort of know what are your little everyday triggers gonna be, right? So do you care what side the toilet paper roll is put on? Do you care if the cap is on the toothpaste? Is one of you really a neat freak and the other one a little messy? Is that going to become a problem? Because these things that are, sometimes viewed as quirks in dating relationships, when we are riding the high of the chemicals and the attraction and the excitement of getting to know someone, sometimes those quirks can turn into these annoyances. And so it's really important, I think, to be around someone and begin identifying, is this something that will bother me in the future? Is this something that I need to have a conversation about? And I want to offer this as a possibility as well. Is this something that I need to work on in myself? Because the little things that I mentioned are little, right? Like, should we really get bothered if the cap is not on the toothpaste? Should we really get bothered if the toilet paper is upside down? Right? These are things that might beg for us to have a little bit of self-reflection and personal healing around those things. But then there's, other things about just how we live our life, right? Like there are some that are a little bit bigger than that. And we're going to kind of get to know that when we live around or are around someone in close quarters more regularly, right? So how do they spend their time? How do they structure their day? Who likes to cook the meals? How does your partner view chores around the house? Do they is that going to change when you guys are together full time, right? So the cleanliness one and the messiness one tends to be something that, if someone's a little messy and someone's a little really like, I fold my socks kind of clean and organized, how are you going to navigate that moving forward, right? So have you spent enough time to kind of understand? Now, we can't obviously predict everything, but just have you spent enough time to kind of get a real idea of who is this person when they are very relaxed in their own environment, and you're not putting on any airs of trying to impress someone? Like have you spent enough time around somebody to really know what that is, and then to know what their quirks are, what your quirks are, what are the things that you need to work on getting over, what are the things that they need to work on getting over, and generally, are those compatible, right? Okay, third question. What level of transparency does the relationship have? So this is one of those things where, it doesn't happen on the first date, but by the time you get engaged or you're considering living with someone forever, right? There needs to be a level of communication, vulnerability, and transparency. Now, since we host a podcast that is all about recovery from sex and pornography addiction and recovery from the trauma of betrayal inside of relationship, we're obviously talking here, when we're talking about transparency, about including transparency of passwords, access to your phones, access to your emails. There is nothing inside of marriage that should be a secret. There is a secret and there is privacy. Privacy is, hey, I'm going to close the door when I get dressed, right? But that doesn't mean I'm doing anything secret behind the door when my partner isn't looking. There is a difference. And I think sometimes people get really hung up on this idea of, well, why do I need to give my partner the I'm not doing anything. Why do I need to give my partner the password to everything in my life? Because when you're choosing to live your life with someone, there needs to be so much openness. Everything needs to be out in the light. And it's not obviously that if it starts that way, that it will prevent anything bad from ever happening. But it's a good foundational baseline to start with, that I'm not keeping anything from you. I don't have any secrets. In fact, I'm so open and so honest, and I don't have anything to hide from you, that you can have access to everything in my life. And it sets a foundation of trust that can be built on. Now, can somebody still get away with something and hide something and keep a secret? Absolutely. So I'm not saying that this is a catch-all. I'm not saying that people can't still lie. I'm just saying that the concept of transparency, if you're having issues with it before you get married, that's going to be a red flag, right? There should be access to finances. There should be access to passwords. There should be access to phones, etc. Okay. Number 4 question to consider. Has your partner been able to share with you about painful things from their past? Everybody has something, right? It could be small, it could be big, it could be anything. But have they been able to kind of talk to you about their life and things that have hurt them? And maybe they had a friend in high school who was mean to them, and it still kind of hurts their feelings because they run into them every once in a while, or did they have, a sexual trauma in their past? Have the two of you shared what were the painful things that have already happened in your life? And if so, what was the healing process that person has already gone through or is going through? Are they actively pursuing processing that thing? Or did they get bullied in high school, and then did they go to some counseling for that, and how did that feel, and how do they feel about it now? Notice how that individual talks about their trauma. So something that is a key to when we talk about going through the recovery process, a sign of healing is that we can create a cohesive narrative, a story that makes sense from the things that have happened to us in the past. This thing happened. This is what it means. This is how it felt. This is what I believed about myself. This is how I processed it. And this is where I am today. We talk about that a lot in the sex and porn recovery, but it's also with betrayal recovery. It's also with anything that happens to us in life. If we can look back and we've processed it in a healthy way, we can almost always create a cohesive narrative that explains how it made us feel, how it impacted our life and our decisions, and how we feel about it now. And if we went through any particular healing process, we should be able to articulate that as well. And then also, we should also be able to say, kind of within that, are there any current ripple effects of that pain? Do I, really struggle with rejection as a primary wound because I've had 3 friends sort of ditch me in life that were I thought lifelong friends? Or do I have a wound of not enoughness because I had a really significant partnership that I thought was going to lead to marriage, and then it ended very abruptly without warning it, right? So what are the current ripple effects, the current emotional struggles that somebody has? Have you been able to talk about them? Are you able to create a cohesive narrative? And how do you relate to each other when it comes to that sort of understanding about your partner? So kind of a bidirectional conversation about what has happened in your past and how have you processed it. Number 5, what is their and your relationship to sex and your bodies? Has there been abuse in the past? Is there sexual trauma of some sort? Were you raised in purity culture? How do you feel about sex? So how do you feel about sex now? How do you feel about sex in your past? How do you feel about sex in marriage? Are you afraid of it? Are you nervous about it? Have you had it before? What does an ideal relationship look like in that area? Like, what are your thoughts and feelings and nerves and vulnerabilities in that area? Have you been able to talk to your partner about these things before deciding to get married to them? So sometimes in the faith community, people might have basic conversations like with each other. They might say, hey, I want to abstain before we get married, and the other person might agree, and then that's the extent of that conversation, right? But it, as if you're listening, you probably understand the importance of this aspect. Like, what is your relationship to sex? What has been your exposure to sex and sexuality? What has been your exposure to pornography? What have you done with that exposure? Do you currently look at it? Have you been sexually abused? Have you been sexually traumatized in some way, whether you were physically abused or not? Is there a negative relationship with sexuality? Are you afraid of it? All of these sorts of conversations. What do you believe about self-pleasure? What do you believe about self-pleasure after you're married? All of these are great questions to make sure that you are talking about with someone that you are considering sharing your life with. So really, really important. I know it can be awkward, especially when you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, whenever you're thinking about getting married, 30. I mean, just at any age, really, if you haven't had these conversations, it's going to feel weird. But we need to get over that if we're going to spend our life with someone. There shouldn't be anything when we are choosing to spend life with someone that we don't feel comfortable talking to that person about. And if we do feel uncomfortable, we need to be upfront about that and say, hey, I want to work through this. I feel uncomfortable talking about this, but it's important. And if we're going to be together forever, there shouldn't be anything that I'm thinking about that we can't talk about at all. Zero. There should not, again, that's going from secrecy to privacy. Like, there shouldn't be anything that is off the table to talk about with someone that you are spending your life with. Choosing a partner is the most, it's you putting yourself in a position that is the most physically, spiritually, and emotionally vulnerable position, because you are choosing to be in regular contact for the rest of your life, physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, with another being. You're sharing moving through the world with their nervous system. And so if that is what you're going to do, then we need to not have things that we're not talking about or that I'm struggling with internally and I'm not willing to share with you. So important conversations about sex before you choose to tie the knot. Number 6, have you met and spent time with each other's families? So this is a big one to consider, is like, how do they feel about their family? How do you feel about your family? What are the positive relationships? How much do you talk to your mom on the phone or not? Is there a sibling that you are close with? Is there a sibling that you have issues with? How would you spend holidays? Like, do you guys want to alternate holidays? Do you live closer to one family and so you travel to the other family for holidays? Do you not want to spend holidays with each other's families? Do you want to create your own thing? And are you both on the same team with that? What does visiting family look like? What do important events in life look like? How do you navigate family stuff as a couple? There's usually some sort of family drama, right? There's usually something in every family. And so have you talked about that? Are you aware of? Have you met? Do you know how you interact with their family? Do you get along with their family? Is there, maybe they have a good relationship with their family, but do you have a good relationship with their family? And if not, what is that going to look like if it's not resolved in 5 years? Thinking ahead, not just to, oh, I love this person so much and I'm so madly in love with them that there's nothing I can't overcome because my love is so strong, but the realities of, what does it look like to spend a holiday away from my family that I have spent every single holiday with up until this point? Am I comfortable enough with this person and with their family to completely upend my life and travel and visit their family and spend time with people that I do or do not feel comfortable with, to share holidays with them? Do we not want to do that, right? Thinking through all of those things. What does that feel like? And that's a lot of times what the dating and the engagement phase should be, is practicing that and experiencing that and seeing how that goes before you commit. So practicing, let's alternate the holidays. Let me have 4th of July cookout with your dad and see, how do we get along? And does this feel comfortable? And what does that look like? And practicing all of that. Okay, number 7, do you feel like your opinions, your voice, and your life goals are respected and valued? So that is really important. Do you feel like you are able to share your dreams, your hopes, your opinions, your thoughts? And when you do, even if your partner sees things from a different perspective, do you feel like your voice is respected and valued? Do they give you the space to share your thoughts? Are you able to vent when you're frustrated? Are you able to disagree on some things and speak to each other in a productive way in those conversations? What about the goals that you have in your life, the dreams and the things that you want to accomplish? Do you have a degree that you need to finish? Do you have a career that you want to pursue? Like, what does this look like when you're talking with someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with? So do you also then support your partner's goals? What are their goals and their visions? If at some point down the road they conflict, the vision that you have and the vision that let's say you want to be a doctor and you are on on track for this specific hospital, and then your partner wants to be a veterinarian and they're on track for this thing over here. If at some point it conflicts in some way, for example, one of you gets a job offer in another state, for example, and it's a really good opportunity, talking through like how might we approach that if our careers at some point take us in different directions? What are some possibilities for, how we might work through or resolve difficult challenges or opportunities that come up that are really, really exciting for one person, but might change the world for the other person. What does that look like? And again, we can't predict everything. It's not like we can say, well, if you get that job offer in 5 years, I will do X, Y, Z. But just sort of thinking ahead that like these are possibilities. It's not always going to be smooth sailing, and surprises will come up. So just kind of thinking about, well, in general, how do you guys feel about that? And how do you talk through difficult considerations like that? And what might that look like? Number 7 or 8. Gosh, I'm getting mixed up here. Number 6, 7, 8. Okay, number 8. Talking about money. Money is going to be really important. How would money be shared or divided? So do you pay all the bills? Does one of you earn the income and provide sort of a spending allowance to the other that they can spend or save? Or, do you share financial accounts? Does one of you earn the bulk of the income, but the other one takes charge of managing the finances and paying the bills, to sort of balance the responsibility? What does that look like? If you are 2 independent earners coming into marriage, what do you do once you're married? Are you going to blend things? Are you going to keep them separate? Are you going to split the bills? What feels good to you? I do recommend, and this is, I think, really important considering the topic that this podcast is usually addressing, I highly recommend that every woman know at least one way that she is capable of earning money and that she have a separate account to save money and that is set aside, like a rainy day account. If someone is saying, hey, I want to be a mom and that is my primary goal in life, and I feel like that is what I want to do and what God wants me to do, and that is, we're considering getting married and we want 3 kids, and I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to take care of them. That's awesome. I would also encourage you to think of, if for some reason I can't have children, or we don't have children, or children end up not being a part of my life in some way, how would I make money, or what would I do that would feel purposeful in my life? What is one way that I can be independent, that I can support myself independently if I needed to? It's really, really important to have that in the back of your mind, that if I ever need it, because it's not even about divorce per se, although on this podcast, we know that that's a possibility. And in life, things happen, but also what if your partner, you're dependent on your partner and then they pass away, right? So it's really important, I think, for every woman to have at least one way that she is aware of, I can earn money in this way. I am interested in this thing. I either have this education or this talent or this hobby or this skill, and I know that I can make money at it. And then it's also really important, I think, even if you have shared accounts that you are, primary earner and you are paying bills out of that account, that I think it's really important that women have a separate bank account that is like a security for them. It just, the world we live in, it tends to be a safe way to do that, a good decision to do that. And it's never too late to start that either. Okay, number 9, whether or not you want children, getting married and having sex, it's a possibility that you might get pregnant or you might have kids. So thinking through, even if you go into this relationship thinking, I don't really want kids, or I'm not kind of heading towards that goal with purpose, do you each feel like the other would be the ideal parent to parent future children? So even if that's not your goal right now, if you were to have children, do you view your potential future partner as the ideal person to be the dad or to be the mom, to be the parent to your potential future kids? It's a really, really important question. I think some of the red flags before getting married is like, if you can't picture that person being a good parent to your kids, it's just a red flag. If I remember when I got married the first time, I really did not want to take his last name. And there were a lot of other little red flags that I sort of like trampled right over, but that was one of them. Like, I didn't really want his last name. And, for whatever subconscious reason, it was, there were a lot of reasons. I think subconsciously I didn't want to get married, and I just ran right over that. So all these little red flags of, do you think you want this person to parent your kids? Do you want to take their last name? Do you want to be vulnerable? Do you want to be honest with them? Is there anything, that's popping up that's a little like, why do I feel that way? When you're thinking about this topic, would they be the ideal parenting? You might also consider, again, even if you don't you're not heading towards that goal, you might even consider, what does parenting look like, and what are the values, whether it's religious or otherwise, that we would want to share with our children if we had them. So just kind of making sure, like, is someone like a really strict parenting style? Is someone a really gentle parenting style? Like, what would that look like? And one way you might sort of one way you might sort of get to know that a little bit with your partner is if you are together all the time, and one of you, or if you live together, you're sharing a pet. So like, how do you, I know children are not pets. I want to make that very clear, obviously, but it's just the idea of like, are they very connected to them? Are they very attentive? Like, you just get to know a lot about someone when you're around them regularly, right? And so when you're thinking about potentially raising children together, what does that look like? What are the values? What are the parenting styles that someone would want to bring into it? What are the types of conversations that someone is willing to have around that topic? Number 10, what similarities or differences do you have within faith or political beliefs? Obviously, our world is very divided in all of this right now. And so it's not that people can't have successful relationships when they see things differently, but it would be really important to know, one, what do you think about these main values in life, and these big topics that cause a lot of conflict with a lot of people? Like, how do you feel about it? What's your perspective? What's your general position on XYZ? What is your faith? And is it a faith where you sort of believe it, but don't practice it? Or is it a faith where you're, deeply religious? How do these things guide your day-to-day life or not? And then, if one of you feels very strongly about something and the other doesn't, how would you navigate that together? How would you navigate that if you had kids? What does this look like long-term? So it's not that people can't disagree in these areas and have successful relationships. But if you do disagree, like have really big disagreements in faith or politics, it's going to be really, really, really important to have extremely healthy communication and extremely respectful communication around these topics if you're going to have a healthy relationship. So really important to make sure those Band-Aids are ripped off before we commit lifelong relationships to each other. All right, number 11, is there anything either one of you feels unresolved in terms of agreements or disagreements? So if there is something that you have talked about in the past and you just kind of set it on the table, or maybe sort of said, hey, we're going to have to agree to disagree right now, we'll move on. If there's something that is important to you that you don't really feel like was resolved, and out of politeness or frustration or overwhelm or whatever that might have been, if it's not resolved, I want you to revisit that conversation before you get married. And I want you to think about, how would you feel if this thing that you disagree on and is not resolved right now, how would you feel if that is still unresolved in 10 years? So you've been married 10 years, you still have this, because that then turns into the potential for a residual, perpetual, continual conflict in your relationship. So how would you feel if that turns into a conflict that is that discussion that the two of you constantly disagree on over and over and over and over and over for the next 10 years? How would you feel about that? If it is significant enough, how are you going to feel if you have kids and you guys disagree on that topic? So thinking about something that you've disagreed on in the past, how have you navigated that? If it is unresolved, how do you feel if it stays unresolved? And is this important enough for you to get resolved before you get married? Number 12, Can you picture being physically and emotionally attracted to this person when they age and or if they gain weight or get sick, right? Anything can happen in life. Our bodies age and they shift. They're going to get wrinkly no matter what we do. Our weight fluctuates as a natural part of aging. Our hormones shift, all these things. People get sick. People get cancer, people have surgeries, people have accidents. Do you love the soul of this person to the extent that you can say, right now, I can say that I love this person so deeply. I care about them so deeply. I align with them, their values, their soul version of themselves so deeply that regardless of whether they get maimed or injured or gain weight or lose weight or whatever happens, I know that I am like soul connected to this person, and that's how deeply I care about them. Because again, little red flags, right? If you are in the throes of early phase of relationship, and there is a doubt in your mind that as you age, you're not going to be attracted to this person, to me, that's a red flag. So, that to me is like, I don't know if I love this person deeply enough to navigate the difficulties of life. And it's something to consider, right? Life happens. It's something to think about. I know it's kind of a random question, but like truly, like, do you think when your partner is old and wrinkly that you're going to be attracted emotionally, physically, and psychologically to that person, right? And that is more of the soul connection that is going to help you get through hard times. So it's an important question to think about. All right. And the last question I have is sort of along the lines that's sort of been inside, sort of folded inside some of these other questions. And that is, do you have any doubts or cold feet or second thoughts at all? That's a red flag. Any doubts or cold feet or second thoughts at all. Now, I say it's a red flag. It's something to consider. It doesn't mean that every single time someone has a question or a thought or whatever that they shouldn't marry this person. But I will say from personal experience, my first marriage I should have not gotten married. I've shared my story on here in other episodes. It was not healthy. I overrode several red flags. I just shouldn't have done it. I should have listened to myself. I should have listened to my family. Ultimately, that relationship ended, right? And thank goodness it did. But I had so many cold feet. My feet were so cold. However you'd say that. My feet were freezing before that wedding. I had so many doubts. I ran over all of the red flags, and it proved out over time, yes, Kylene, you should not have made that decision. With Patrick, even though, you've heard our story. You know how deeply this impacted me. You know how horrible betrayal was for me and how depressed and how just it was like the depths of hell for me to pull myself out of this and get through recovery. But going into this relationship, I had no cold feet at all. I did not have a single doubt in my mind that this was the person that I wanted to spend my life with. So the difference for me when I was getting married the first time versus the second time it felt so aligned. And I really do think that alignment and that deep friendship and that deep connection that we had is part of the reason that we've actually been able to move through the horrors of betrayal and addiction recovery, because we had that connection and we liked each other that deeply that we had something really foundational that we could go, hey, if we get rid of all this bad stuff and we heal these painful parts, we can have a successful relationship. But there was no way I could have done that in my previous relationship. There were too many red flags. My feet were too cold. There were so many doubts. We were not aligned. We were not compatible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I really do think cold feet is something to consider. If you have any doubts or hesitations, please listen to that. And remember, like, this is a lifelong thing. You just don't know what's going to happen in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So if you are having a hesitation right now, don't do it. Don't do it. And if anything, just postpone it for now so you can think things through. Just postpone it for now would be the piece of advice I would give. So So that's all I have for you today. I guess that was about 13 questions I would recommend. I'm sure, again, that this is not totally comprehensive, but these are some of the heavy hitters, some of the things that we either made mistakes with or we've learned from, or, we've noticed that people don't talk about before getting married, or sometimes even inside of marriage, right? You go back to the sex question. How many of us really had in-depth conversations about, how do we feel about that? What do we think about sex? What kind of sex do we like? What are we into? What do we think about healthy sex? All these, what about pornography, right? How many of us had those conversations, but they were a shallow level, or we were scared to have those conversations, or, before I share all the time when I was finding out about Patrick's addiction, I felt so awkward saying words out loud, right? So now I'm able to have conversations with you here on the podcast and with my clients where, you just don't even think twice about saying, masturbation or pornography or, self-pleasure, whatever. But, before, it made me blush and it made me really uncomfortable. So these are the kinds of Band-Aids that I think are really important to be ripped off before you say, we are compatible enough to spend our life together. Now, again, I just shared with you, there are things within this list that, I didn't do well, and Patrick and I have gone through this really hard thing and we've made it. So it's not like if you didn't answer one of these questions, you're not going to make it. But again, when we go through these things and we mature and we go through pain and we learn about things, what is healthy, what is recovery, what is going to help people, we want to pass that on to you. So if you have kids in college, if you have kids that are engaged, if you are considering getting remarried, these are the conversations that we would encourage you to have. And if you want to share this episode with somebody that is dating or engaged or considering marriage or worried about getting remarried, feel free to send them this episode, and hopefully it can open up some healthy conversations within their relationship, because we want you to have safe, healthy, happy relationships moving forward. I hope that this episode was helpful. Remember that every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we will see you next week. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.